9 of the surviving members of the 1912 team there, and it was to me it was a joy just to sit back and watch them get reacquainted and that sort of thing. And some of the funny things that happened when I took him back, you know, the Red Sox picked up the tab for everything for the 9 players and whoever their traveling companions were. And we got there on Friday evening, a little late Friday afternoon actually. So we went down to the dining room that night, and I asked the waiter, I said, "Are any of the other old-timers here yet?" He says, "Oh yeah." He said, "That table over there, those are all the old-timers." And Hugh was sitting there, it was about as far as from here to Greg. And Hugh was looking, he says, "That's not them." I said, "Hugh, the waiter should know." He said, "No, that's not, I don't recognize any of them." I said, "Well, of course you don't, you know." So finally I convinced him to get up and go over. So all you can do is go over and ask him. So he got up real like a half-scared kid, and he went over, and I saw him say something to one guy, and they all jumped up, you know, and to greet him and shake hands. And he sat down. I just sat back at the table all alone and watched it and enjoyed every minute of it, you know. But then, you know, Hugh was not a drinker. He very seldom would ever take a drink. Another funny thing that happened that night, before he went over to meet these people, the waiter came and asked if we'd like a drink before dinner, and I said, "Well, yeah, I think probably we would." I said, "What do you want, Hugh?" And he said, "I don't know." I said, "You want a Manhattan?" He said, "Yeah, I'll have one of those." And I said, "Would you rather have a martini?" "Yeah, I'll have one of those." "Or maybe just have a beer." "Hugh, yeah, I'll have one of those." And so I told the waiter, I said, "Just bring him the mildest drink you can bring him." And then this went on, and we had a wonderful 3 days, or two days. We had that get-together that night, and then, which pleased me is that each day I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner with these 9 guys, you know. Smokey Joe Wood, and I remember him particularly. He was a great guy. And kids come in for autographs. Smokey wouldn't leave till he'd given the last autograph. And we just enjoyed it. And then, of course, I knew Ray Collins, the left-hand pitcher for them. I knew Ray and his wife long before this because they used to come up and visit the Bedients. And so the next day, Saturday, they had the big game against Detroit. And, of course, all of us invited guests had real good seats, and I went to everything with Mrs. Collins. She kind of took me under her wing, and we were together most of the time. And then they had a banquet that night, big banquet, with all of the coaches and officials of both teams and these celebrities, and enjoyed that very much. You know, just sitting back and basking in reflected glory, I guess you'd say. You know, but Hugh, as I say, was very modest. And one thing I remember, you might wonder some of his thrills. I asked him one time what maybe was a big thrill for him, and he said probably one of the biggest thrills was when he was in the minor leagues, AAA or whatever, and Mickey Cochran was catching, and he was known as the big Batman, you know, and he said that it was a close game toward the end of the game, and they walked Mickey Cochran to get to Hugh. And Hugh hit a home run. He said that was probably one of his biggest thrills. But like I say, you had to drag it out of him to get him.
Did you ever talk about the game in Corey?
Very little, very little. He talked about the game against Mathewson. He said that the day was just made for him. He said it was a dark day, and his fastball was just popping in there. He said, I don't think I threw over a half a dozen curveballs all day. He says, because it was just dark, and it was just a little bit hard for him to see his fastball, and so that's what made the game for him.
Yeah. You talk about the last game, that 8th game at all? I mean, talk about pressure. Turn on the lights here.
No, not really. He didn't. Not that I discussed with him.
Federal League, I mean, he had, in many senses, he was one of a renegade.
Yeah, yeah.
Having gone from the established league into the Federal League, and there was a lot of controversy at the time. He kind of put his career at risk.
Yeah, that's right. I spent so many years that I was with him that I'd forgotten half of what he was telling me. I wish I had remembered more of it. But I do have all of his scrapbooks and all this memento. In fact, this is what they got when they won the World Series. Instead of nowadays they get these big rings and everything, they get this little pin and it says World Champions 1912. And it was a diamond in the center of this. And all this is a lapel pin. Well, when Hugh died, I had been married to his daughter 29 years at the time, and when he died on our anniversary, my wife gave me this ring. And that's the diamond that was in there. And he and I were very close. I mean, as close as father and son. In fact, I think he looked upon me as a replacement of his son that he lost. In fact, I started dating his daughter a month before his son was killed in 1940. And married her in 1944, so Hugh was my father-in-law for 21 years. And a real gentleman.
He wasn't pitching any of the exhibition games then, or any of the semi-pro at that time, was he? He would have been pretty old, I guess.
Yeah.
You never saw him pitch?
No, only I saw him pitch like Bob says, in batting practice down at the Faulkner Park or something like this.
Now, his son, was there Hugh Jr.? Is it?
Yes. Well, not Hugh Jr., but Hugh Palmer Bedient.
Okay.
Hugh was Hugh Carpenter Bedient. But his son Hugh, he went by the name of Palmer, and he was a good pitcher in his own right, and had a good record. But Hugh had Connie Mack look over his son, watch him pitch. And Connie Mack said that he didn't have good enough fastball to make the majors.
Was there any, did he ever talk about, was there pressure on the kid when you think about here's the son of a local legend, a pitcher in the same position?
No, he never talked about the pressure of it all, but of course he had great support for his son, and his son was a little bit more hot-headed than Hugh. And remember, Hugh would try to control him as far as his temper on the baseball field was concerned.
And you, curious, do you still get letters for folks looking for memorabilia of Hugh Bedient?
Haven't in the last few years. No, it's been a few years since I got any, but I've run out of signatures now. I kept all his old checks and things, you know, and would cut the signatures off and send them to people, but it's been several years now.
I didn't know that, Russ. Russ, you and I didn't know this. We would have been right down there in Herm.
That's right.
A long time ago. For that autograph you saw up there, and occasionally in the autograph market, you know, I would buy these when Hugh Bedient comes up.
Yeah. Well, getting back to this pin, you see the size of this thing, and then what they get today. I played golf last year with a linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys who had 2 Super Bowl rings, and the day I played with him, he had on one of these rings. And the ring itself was probably 2 times as big as this. And I asked him how much those rings cost. He said $14,000 a piece. A little bit of difference between, of course, the difference in salaries too, you know.
What kind of money did you get to win that World Series? Did he ever say that?
His contract, they showed it on the screen, it was $3,000 a year.
But I mean, for winning the World Series, did they have?
Oh, I never knew what his purse was.
Probably didn't get a cut in those days.
Yeah. I know they offered him They offered him a bonus if he wouldn't get married that fall. But he did anyway, he got married. And Ray Collins, excuse me, just met Ray Collins, the left-handed pitcher, and his wife stood up with Hugh and his wife when they got married.
I have a question. I work with Swat Erickson down at the Arcana, the warehouse, and he used to talk about, now correct me, this was quite a while ago, but correct me if I'm wrong, that he and Hugh Bedient hooked up together at Faulkner on different exhibition games as pitchers. Were they?
I believe they have, yeah.
They did. Because when I was just a little kid in diapers, I used to go up to Ralph and Warren's Mays farm.
Oh, yeah.
We used to spend a lot of time up there.
Yeah.
And they used to come down to the ball games. And I used to get in the back of the car and come down with them and watch the ball games there. And I can vaguely remember some of the good ball games they had down there.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if I'm on the right course here.
Yeah. Swat and Hugh were good friends. They go back and forth, the families.
I think they both pitched with the Spiders together.
Yeah, I
the
believe
other
they
pitchers
did.
named Nate Dreyer and Tony Spetz and Harold Sweet. We played with the Spiders up in Zeller Park.
I used to deliver milk to Nate Dryer's place up there on the corner of Price Street, you know, and we'd get hooked up once in a while in a little baseball schedule, and I'd get way behind on my deliveries.
25,000 is probably the largest crowd that any happening has demanded in our community. That's overwhelming. That's outstanding.
Sure is.
And that's half the city's population, right now.
I have the original picture of that.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, and but it shows more of it. It shows the buildings on the corner of Main and Third, and there's across where Clark's drugstore was. I think it was a 3 or 4 story building.
Did he get off the train in Faulkner or Jamestown, you remember?
Faulkner, I believe. And there were people sitting in every window in this 3 or 4 story building. Maybe 3 people sitting in each window, you know, besides the shoulder-to-shoulder crowd in the street.
That's probably more than the end of the war celebration, I'm sure.
You're probably right about it.
Quite a tribute.
Yeah. Hugh Ball didn't get that many people when he came back.
Right.
I didn't know how lucky I was. I'm not as old as you, but he ended his career at Carborundum, and I got to know him for 2 years. And of course, I lived down the van, so I knew all about Hugh and everything. And what I'd like to say is, as great an athlete he was even a better human being. He was fantastic.
Never knew of anybody that would say a bad word about him.
Did he come from a large family, and did he have a large family?
Well, neither. He had one sister, and he had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. Well, they had a 4th one, a boy that died at birth, but the son that lived and was a baseball player himself later went into the Air Force just before World War II and was killed in a plane crash over New York City, just in 1940, just prior to the war.
In a military plane?
Yeah, he was a pilot, a bomber pilot, and
Were they in formation?
they were in formation, and a couple of planes locked wings up there in formation over, I guess it was over Long Island, and he was killed.
I was on the track team with him at Faulkner for 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
I got a picture of that at home.
Oh yeah.
With Eldie Quinlan, you remember him?
Oh, yeah.
Howard Fisk.
Yeah, remember the names at least. Yeah.
Did the Yankees own the Red Sox way back in the 12?
You got me. I don't know.
No,
I don't think
It wasn't even Taylor, I think. Wasn't it Taylor?
But he owned it when you were
I can't tell you that. Who was
72?
owning them then? 62.
Probably Yankees.
Yeah.
62.
think the guys that owned the Red Sox then was Harry Frazee. He's the guy that ultimately sold Babe Ruth to the Yankees. That's a great deal. He had a shortfall, that story, he had a shortfall in a Broadway production that he had at the time. He needed $200,000, so he sold the play or sold Babe Ruth, got the money, covered his losses at the Broadway show.
Doesn't Babe Ruth still hold the world's record for consecutive scoreless innings in World Series?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I think so. I think Whitey Ford was that record. Drysdale?
That coat in the way there, man.
At one time, a few years back, quite a few years back, that game with Christy Mathewson in the World Series was listed as one of the 10 greatest pitching duels in World Series history. Probably still is.
Tom, is some of this due to you?
Yep.
My oldest boy knew him very well. My oldest boy was about, must have been 18 when Hugh died. And so he and my two daughters knew Hugh very well. But Tom was quite a bit younger.
Old-time pictures here.
Did he have much in the form of, or do you have much stuff in the form of memorabilia of Hughes left? Jackets, gloves?
I had his glove years ago, and I wish I still had it. I don't know what happened to it.
Probably went out in the fire sale with everything else.
Boy,
Everybody's baseball cards.
The thing, I wouldn't have worn it when I was in grade school. It was so beat up. Just a couple of pieces of leather stuck together.
Slightly smaller than the gloves they had today.
Oh, yeah, much smaller, and no padding, you know?
Right?
Now,
Did you guys appreciate, you Faulkner folks, appreciate, he was, older at the time. Was there a sense of what he had really accomplished?
No, I didn't, until he came to the high school, and I really didn't at that time. I just knew he was a great guy, and he had pitched in the majors, and it was neat, but other than that, all this stuff, I really didn't realize it.
But I mean, I think that's part of the benefit of this group here.
Yeah.
Frankly, is to preserve some of that stuff, and someplace, somewhere, in the Fenton Historical Society will probably be, I'll send this video and your tape and Lawrence's thoughts and Bobby's thoughts and things we've done not only on Hugh Bedient but others, so that if anybody's interested 50 years from now, they'll at least have something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Greg, Herm had sent me some copy of a book, out of a book, Everything Happens in 1912, and it talks about Taylors. As early as 19 was know that the Taylors, the General and John I, would not renew the lease on Huntington Avenue and were scouting around for a new home for the Red Sox. Construction of the new ballpark Fenway began in 1911 when the Taylors announced they would have the finest ballpark in the country. And then it talks about, but in late December 1911, there came an unexpected announcement that the Taylors had sold 50% of the club to John McAller, capital MC, capital A-L-L-E-R, manager of the Washington Club, and Robert B. McRoy, Van Johnson's right-hand active controlman.
You're right, McAleer. McAleer is the owner.
1911.
Pictures on that. In fact, that card that you got as a souvenir card, Hermie, you'll see the picture of McAleer in his hat.
Oh, yeah.
He's the owner.
It doesn't say when they sold it.
See any of these?
I probably have them all.
Probably have.
And then a fellow by the name of Jake Stahl, who would give up his Chicago banking job and return to the club as the first baseman manager. And he later got a piece of the action market.
Second house.
Hermie, when Hugh passed away, did Major League Baseball recognize that in any way? Was there an alumni association? Was there wreaths sent? Was there letters sent by?
My memory fails me as to what happened when he passed away.
Just curious as to whether they track all of these things here in Major League Baseball.
I'm sure we got cards from the Collinses and things like this, but
As far as the Red Sox or Major League Baseball?
no, nothing that I can recall.
Does his burial site recognize his baseball career?
No, he's buried down Levant Cemetery.
There's no marking of...
Nothing regarding baseball, no.
Tell them that story about when they were traveling around on the training exhibition and with Ruth and Thorpe and
Well-
Garrett was with them.
Well, I don't recall Ruth and Thorpe and when they travel on these Pullmans, you know, Jim Thorpe was a wild man anyway, I guess, and Hugh used to say that they try to get some sleep, and Thorpe would come and start throwing guys out of the berths. He said, when Thorpe's awake, everybody's awake.
Now, would this be, would they have been traveling, I mean, both, Thorpe was on the Giants. This would have been part of the World Series, they've been traveling together?
I don't know what the situation was. He just tells the story of
Mom said it was like some exhibition thing.
was it? Yeah. Too bad.
It was in the off-season.
Too bad my sister-in-law isn't well and could. She has a mind like a newspaper. She knows all of these facts, you know. And
But that was a big part, frankly, of the finances and the income of ball players, was if you were in that upper echelon doing barnstorming, they could make a lot of money. In fact, Babe Ruth, that 1921 story, he literally was guaranteed, after the World Series in 1921, to go on this 15-day barnstorming tour and was going to make $25,000, which was greater than his salary for the entire year.
yeah.
Gold mine at that time.
So that's why he went out, even though Judge Landis said, don't even consider it, but there was that much money to be made.
Yeah.
So he went, ultimately got suspended, lost all that money, lost his World Series money, lost everything, because he came to Jamestown.
In Hugh's scrapbook, the only thing I see is for advertising is that there was a picture of him advertising some shoe.
Ah,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Hugh was advertising?
Yeah.
Oh, no
The
kidding.
shoe
He
company. The
endorsed
shoe
it, huh?
company. Endorsement. Yeah. The shoe company had an ad in there with showing Hugh and
Interesting.
he wears these shoes.
Did you ever, I showed a picture of a baseball card, which is a kind of a team card. Did you ever see baseball cards of Bedient?
No, I saw a picture. I've never seen the card. I
Yeah.
saw a picture of a card.
And that's the only one I could find. It was kind of a broken, it was a picture type card, 1913 they put it out.
Yeah.
And that little pin. I saw it in an auction.
Yeah.
I said, man, I gotta get that sucker.
Can I ask an abbreviated question here? Does anybody know when they started with the cards?
I don't.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Clearly, cigarette cards, they were cigarette cards before the turn of the century. 1887, 1888. I think, Russ, is that your understanding? I mean, I've got one of them way back when.
The big push started in about the 50s when Tops and them were really good.
They had small cards. Walmart had them up there when they opened up. They had small ones like that with hand wipers cards.
Yeah, I think these are
Then what?
these are by Frank Hyde.
Mighty Rule.
Quite a few of those.
Right?
Small cards.
That's right.
Yes.
This is interesting to me. When Hugh got sold to the Yankees, his roommate was Muddy Rule, who was the farm director of the Detroit Tigers. Okay? Well, Muddy Rule was my coach in spring training with the Cleveland Indians in 1951.
No kidding.
He was a little guy. It was like a Vandy Rooster, but he, it was really interesting. I never realized that. And Rudy York was at spring training, you know, so kind of interesting. Muddy was nice, just a, he was a catcher. And, am I right?
Yeah,
He was a catcher, you know, and he was so small to be a catcher, I thought, you know, but he reminded me of, tell you he reminded me of is Roger McTagg, that size, you know, so.
Hey, Hermie, this has been terrific.
Oh.
I gotta tell you, for a lot of reasons, we're glad you're here. And there's a lot of reasons I'm sure you're glad you're here too.
Yeah, there are.
But this has been terrific to share some memories.
Well,
Yeah.
the story on the back was about you winning a ball game in the mini league.
Who, Parky?
Yeah.
What's
Great.
that?
Yeah, he said he
What'd he say?
I'll find Grandpa, and he'd get in my car, and pretty soon he'd come back pulling in the yard with you in the seat beside him.
Was he involved with the fire department? Was he involved, to that extent, politics and all?
No,
That's me.
no,
Yeah, that's what.
no.
Everybody thought that was Russian.
He would shy away from the limelight.
Yeah. Did you ever have nights down at the college stadium? Do you remember anything, Bedient night or anything like that?
No, I remember one night they had a Hall of Fame night or something down there, and this was just, a month before Hugh died. He was in real bad shape at the time, and they invited him, wanted him to come to this doings, you know. And Wes Paplow, the old police chief from Faulkner, was a real good friend of Hugh's too. So Wes and I took him up there, and they allowed me to drive in the stadium right up to the stairway going into the grandstand. And then Wes Paplow helped me, and we walked Hugh up to his seat, and they introduced him from the grandstand rather than from out on the field. I remember he was so weak at the time I had to stand up and pull him up onto his feet so he could be recognized. And he could only sit there for maybe 2 innings, and he was so skinny at this point in time that so we took him back, put him in the car, and took him for a ride, and it was his last ride.
Yeah. Did he follow baseball?
Not,
Listen on the radio? Television?
no, not too closely, but his wife did.
Yeah.
His wife was knew everything
Yeah.
that was going on in the baseball. She could tell you who was with who and who they were traded to and what the religion they were and everything else. You know, I mean, everybody, every team, she knew them all. And she was hard of hearing. And she lived about a block and a half from my wife and I. And so I'd go to walk over to the house, and I'd get halfway there, and I could hear her radio in the summertime when the doors were open, halfway to her house. I guess the neighbors all knew she was a baseball fan.
That was even before boom boxes.
Yeah, it was. But she had a boom box out there. Yeah.
Well, again, Hermie, thanks a million. This is just an absolute terrific.
My pleasure. That was a tremendous film.
I'll make sure you get a copy. Maybe we'll enhance it with a little bit of stuff we have here.
You really deserve a lot of credit for that film.
Well, I was inspired. I tend to be historically inquisitive. I knew, as I mentioned, Bedient's paths and my paths would cross merely as a guy who would stand out there in right field, kind of on the fence, watching Duenas pitch or play. And I was on the same team, and so he was always, I was introduced to him, but I had no sense of what that was all
Like me,
about.
yeah, like me.
And now that I had some personal touch with the guy, and I even found in my old scrapbooks at home an autograph. Somebody told me to get his autograph, so I did. So way back when. So there was a curiosity, personal curiosity. Right on. And fortunately, Frank Hyde had preserved a lot of that stuff that you know about 1912. The rest of the stuff after 1912, it gets kind of misty, and you don't know the Federal League, you don't know what happened in Toledo's and things like that. And obviously, Frank had sat down with Hugh and preserved that.
Yeah.
Because that part gets lost. You really would know that the guy pitched really one very wonderful year in 1912. Well, the truth of the matter is the guy pitched until 1925.
Yeah.
in the high minors. The major leagues for a few years and the high minors, and there's very few of us who even know people who pitched in the high minors, and he did it for a long period of time. That's magnificent. You got to be good to continue to do that, even with sore arm and all.
Yeah.
Give me there.